As far as I could tell, it was early July. This narrative took place at the start of summer. I usually made an effort to stay away from home, either by visiting Europe or my college town. Summer was always an excuse to be anywhere but home. However, that wasn't feasible this time. Unwittingly, I found myself heading back home at the start of the season. I simply had to get through 1 week of summer before boarding a jet to Germany. I wasn't particularly inclined to see any of my previous acquaintances, but I also didn't want to remain at home. So, I found ways to occupy myself, waking up early and spending my days hiking, watching movies, or simply driving around without a purpose. Eventually, though, I grew bored of my usual activities and craved something more thrilling. Back in the day, my friends and I used to train hop, one of the many reckless behaviors I had since abandoned. But on this particular day, I made the impulsive decision to indulge in a little nostalgia. I drove to a remote set of freight tracks I was familiar with. Trains frequently passed through this area, offering plenty of opportunities. The tracks were surrounded by trees, which provided enough cover to ensure I wouldn't be easily spotted. The last thing I needed was to get caught engaging in illegal activity after staying out of trouble for so long. I parked my car, tucked it away for safekeeping, and made my way to the tracks. Let me explain the layout to make it easier to understand. This particular set of railroad tracks stretched through the trees for a while before leading into a tunnel. Just past the tunnel was a small clearing, and beyond that, a massive bridge that spanned a body of water. My friends and I used to hop onto trains at the bridge's approach, but since I was alone this time, I wouldn't have the option of returning to my car unless I was willing to walk 10 kilometers back. So, I decided I would hop onto a train, ride it through the tunnel, and then enjoy a peaceful stroll back to my car. I walked along the rails, biding my time until a train came along. It was probably around 2 o'clock or 3:30 in the afternoon. After about 10 minutes, I began to feel the familiar tremors in the rails. I hurried to the side and did my best to stay out of sight. As far as I knew, freight train conductors didn't care enough to report people walking along the tracks, but I wasn't willing to take any chances. I waited as the train passed, letting a good number of cars go by before stepping out of my hiding spot. I picked a car that seemed easy enough to grab onto and started running alongside the train, just like I had done countless times before. Once I felt secure, I seized the ladder and swung myself up. The train wasn't moving too fast, making it easy to board. As the train approached the tunnel, I suddenly noticed an odd flash of light above me. At first, I thought it might be a spark from the train, but something about it felt off. I had never seen anything like it before. There were no exposed wires or hazardous objects in the tunnel, but it was too late to get off now. The train was picking up speed. The tunnel was completely straight, so I closed my eyes, letting the rush of adrenaline wash over me. But then, out of nowhere, I felt something. A hand emerging from the darkness, grabbing my leg. I lost my balance and nearly fell, but I gripped the train tightly and screamed. Kicking wildly, I tried to shake off whatever had grabbed me. Before I could react, another hand grabbed at my leg. Panic surged through me as I scrambled up the ladder, desperate to escape. By the time the train exited the tunnel, I didn't think twice. I leaped off. I stood there, watching as the train continued across the bridge, my heart pounding. I paced around the small clearing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Who or what was in that tunnel? And why the hell had they tried to pull me off the train? As my thoughts raced, I was hit with the horrifying realization. The only way back to my car was through that tunnel. There was no way in hell I was going back through it. Not with those people or things inside. My silhouette would be visible to them, and I'd be walking in total darkness. I sat down, feeling trapped. The bridge wasn't an option either. A train could come at any moment, and the bridge was far too long for me to risk crossing. I considered calling someone for help, but who? The police weren't an option, I had already broken the law just by being there. With no other choice, I picked up a rock and started moving toward the tunnel. I knew for certain there had been at least 2 figures inside, but there could have been more. I made it about halfway through before I heard it, another set of hands, accompanied by a faint clicking sound. It was unmistakably human, but something about it felt off. I froze. Walking any further into that tunnel felt like a death sentence. Then, a surge of confidence hit me. I pulled out my phone. "Stay back or I'll shoot," I shouted, my voice echoing through the tunnel. For a moment, everything went silent. I was bluffing, of course. I didn't have a gun. But I figured bluffing was better than walking forward in silence. Then, an idea struck me. I quickly searched for a gunshot sound effect on YouTube, cranked up my phone's volume, and hit play. The sound was louder than I expected, reverberating violently off the tunnel walls. I prayed that whoever, or whatever, was in there bought the act. Without waiting another second, I turned and ran. I sprinted through the darkness, bracing myself for an attack at any moment. But somehow, miraculously, I made it to the other side. I didn't stop until I was safely out of the tunnel. Panting, I turned around. That's when I saw them. 2 silhouettes stood in the darkness, just beyond the tunnel's entrance, motionless. Then, as I turned to leave, the most horrifying scream I had ever heard erupted from the tunnel. It was human, undoubtedly, but there was something unnatural about it. Something monstrous. I have no intention of ever train hopping again,